Welcome to NIT International. We are here once again to provide you with the latest news. Berlin will support missile production in Ukraine, showing Western involvement. After Ukraine hit Moscow, Russia launched 900 drones, most were shot down. The war has entered a new phase as the West lifts weapon limits. Let's get into the details. Today, we bring our viewers the moment when war spilled beyond the maps, darkened the skies, and began targeting capital cities. This time, the news isn't just from the front lines. This time, the fire has struck the heart of the fortress. Ukraine's new generation wave of attacks is dismantling Russia's immunity walls one by one. Moscow is no longer outside the war. This time, the drones didn't strike in Belgorod, but in Vladivostok, right in the middle of Russian headquarters at Desantnaya Bay. And at the same time, on the Sumy front, under Putin's so-called security buffer justification, a buildup of 50,000 troops was completed. Kiev responded not just on the battlefield, but at the diplomatic table as well, because diplomacy alone no longer works. The message from Berlin is one that could change the course of the war. Germany has decided to begin production of long-range missiles on Ukrainian soil. The West is no longer just a supporter, it is now a producer active in the field. And in this atmosphere, the words falling from Lavrov's lips sounded less like a peace offer and more like a threat of war. But meanwhile, something else was happening in the sky. Ukraine struck Moscow again, right in the heart of the capital. And the echo was felt within the Kremlin's walls. Trump announced that his patience had run out. Zelensky said the countdown for peace talks had begun. And for Putin, time for peace is running out. The world is witnessing not just a new offensive, but shifting balances, unraveling alliances, and the approach of a major reckoning. Because here, in this video, we will tell you about the clashes on the ground, the diplomatic maneuvers behind the scenes, and the intelligence games at the heart of the invisible war. Step by step, not between the lines, but hitting the target directly. Stay with us and keep watching. May 29th, 1:30 a.m. Moscow was silent in the dark, but that silence was broken by the sound of an approaching shadow. And that shadow came as Ukraine's response, gliding from the sky. Unmanned, silent, invisible, but its impact powerful enough to be felt in the capital. Intelligence teams under Ukraine's Ministry of Defense conducted weeks of satellite analysis, signal interceptions, and electronic scans mapping gaps in air defense. And on the night of May 29th, blind spots in Moscow's radar coverage were marked one by one. That night, a multi-layered drone operation was launched. The first takeoffs didn't come from Ukrainian territory. Some drones were launched near Kharkiv, while others lifted off from camouflaged zones near the Belarus border. But the most striking detail was that drone navigation was controlled via a satellite-linked station based in Poland to prevent signal tracking. In other words, the command came from a different country. But the order was clear: infiltrate, stay unseen. By the time Moscow's air defense radars detected the first wave, it was already too late. Because the Ukrainian-made kamikaze drones had already charted their course. And then, the sound of an explosion rose from the Myrax Park residential complex. But it wasn't just a building that was hit. This location, only 800 meters from the Russian Armed Forces General Staff Academy, sent a clear message: your heart is now the target. Minutes after the explosion, Moscow firefighters arrived at the scene. Surface-level damage, a few burned vehicles, cracked windows, but the real fracture appeared in Putin's perception of security. This attack declared that Ukraine wasn't just defending itself, it was drawing the battlefield into the heart of Moscow. And this was just the first wave. That pinpoint strike on Moscow's core triggered a response from the Kremlin. Because Putin now realized that Ukraine's capacity for cross-border intervention could no longer be ignored, and the response came from the air. Within 48 hours, Russia launched over 900 drone attacks on Ukrainian territory. The goal was clear: not to respond, but to intimidate. to collapse energy infrastructure, break the psychological resilience of cities, and shake Ukraine's determination. But they failed. Because this time, Ukraine was prepared. Patriot systems from the US, Iris-T platforms from Germany, and Stormer vehicles supported by the UK, Ukraine built a steel shield in the sky. And every drone Russia sent crashed into that shield. Kiev, Kharkiv, Dnipro. 3 cities were targeted simultaneously, but none of the systems failed. In a statement made at dawn, the Ukrainian Air Force was clear. Out of 900 launched drones, 760 were destroyed. This was not just a defensive success, it was a show of force. And now we ask you, what does this war in the sky signal? Will technology prevail or strategy? Share your thoughts in the comments, because this war is being fought not only on the ground, but in minds as well. But wait, air defense is not enough. Ukraine is no longer content with merely stopping incoming threats. It wants to produce. And do you know who stands beside them? Berlin. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz appeared before the cameras. Beside him, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. And from that podium, he spoke a sentence that will go down in history. We will not only send weapons to Ukraine, we will now help them produce long-range missiles on their own territory. Yes, you heard right. Germany is no longer just a military aid provider, but a production partner. And this marks a sharp departure from Berlin's previously cautious policy. After months of debate, an official announcement finally came. The name Taurus missiles may not have been mentioned, but the signal was clear. The West is no longer imposing limited-range restrictions on Ukraine. On the contrary, it is extending the range together. Germany's Spiegel newspaper wrote that the new generation systems developed by Ukraine aren't as sophisticated as the Taurus, but are easier to integrate. The first prototypes are expected to reach the front lines within weeks. What does this mean? Russia's internal security, not just its rear lines, is now at risk. Moscow, Kursk, Belgorod are now part of the new target map. And Berlin's move is not just aimed at helping Ukraine, but is a direct strategic warning to the Kremlin. Now we ask you, with this move, is Germany prolonging the war or bringing it closer to an end? Share your views in the comments, because everyone's opinion matters in this decision. But the story doesn't end here, because only hours after this announcement, the West removed an even greater restriction. And that restriction is one that could completely change the course of this war. Germany was not alone. France, the United Kingdom, and the United States also took simultaneous action. And their message was clear. The weapons we provide to Ukraine will no longer be used solely for defense. So, the targets are no longer just Russian units on the front lines, but military and logistical infrastructures inside Russia itself. Yes, you heard right. Moscow, Belgorod, Kursk are all now in the crosshairs. And this decision shook the Kremlin to its core. Because after years of trying to intimidate the West with red line threats, Putin has finally encountered a wall. And that wall is the West's determination. Pentagon sources announced that the new missiles Ukraine will receive in the coming weeks will no longer be for preventive defense, but will possess counteroffensive capabilities. And this is not just a military development. It means the very definition of war is being rewritten. The first reaction after this statement came, of course, from the Kremlin, but it was even more aggressive than usual. Russia's foreign ministry declared Germany's move a provocation that will drag Europe into total war. And the following statements were not diplomatic, but direct threats. Moscow officially declared Berlin a party to the war. But the threat wasn't just verbal. Within 48 hours, movement began on the Sumy front. Russia deployed 50,000 troops to Ukraine's border. This attack, launched with no preparation, air support, or coordination, was a rushed, panicked operation. And Ukraine noticed immediately. Kiev's command evaluated signals from its intelligence network. HIMARS batteries were activated, drones were launched instantly. And that morning, the assault launched in Sumy was crushed before it could even make contact. The defeated Russian units were forced to retreat. Some were caught before they could even dig trenches, others were identified while calling for support over the radio. Ukraine didn't just defend. It launched a counteroffensive and pushed the front line outward. This wasn't just a military collapse for Putin, it was a political one too. Because for the first time on global screens, it wasn't retreating, but surrendering Russian soldiers that were seen. So, what do you think? How did this defeat echo through the Kremlin? Will Putin become more radical or try to conceal this collapse? Share your thoughts with us, because the next developments aren't coming with silence, they're coming with danger. And the first clue to that danger, this time doesn't come from Moscow, but directly from Vladivostok. Yes, Russia's Far East. The coastal city Putin believed was untouchable, that the war could never reach. But that night, the silence was shattered by the sound of two separate missile strikes in Desantnaya Bay. Ukraine's Defense Intelligence Directorate, HUR, confirmed the operation. Our special units infiltrated the 155th Separate Guards Marine Brigade. Our target was personnel and command infrastructure. And it was successfully completed. The sound of those explosions didn't just destroy a headquarters, it shattered a myth. The belief that Russia's east is safe no longer exists. Local sources report at least 10 ambulances and an evacuation helicopter were seen in the area. Burned equipment was secretly transported away in Ural-type military trucks, but the leaks have already begun. Footage spreading on Telegram shows heavily damaged barracks, soldiers fleeing in panic, and roads sealed off with sirens. Russian officials, as always, a gas canister exploded. But the public doesn't believe it, because what exploded there wasn't just pipes. It was Putin's sense of security in the East. And this security crisis isn't just inside Russia, it's testing the limits of patience in Washington too. There are claims that US President Donald Trump has given Putin a 2-week deadline, and if a ceasefire isn't declared within that time, America's stance will change. This is not an offer, it's the final warning. Because the Kremlin used Trump's diplomatic outreach as a tactic to buy time. In that time, not a single concrete step was taken for peace. On the contrary, cruise missiles were launched once again at Ukrainian cities. Trump's response was far from a classic presidential statement. It was direct, frustrated, confused, and angry. I don't understand what Putin is trying to do, but I know one thing very clearly. If these attacks on Ukrainian cities continue, we will not allow it. These words weren't just for the Kremlin. They were a signal to NATO and the capitals of the West. Trump doesn't want to enter the field, but he's right at the threshold. And now, there's only one question on everyone's mind. What will happen in 2 weeks? Do you think Putin will back down? Share your thoughts with us, because this time, events aren't just unfolding at the front lines, but in the decision rooms of world leaders. And as the moment of decision approaches, the Kremlin may have added new mistakes to its previous ones. Because this time, according to claims, the target isn't the front, but the heart of Europe, Berlin. 3 individuals were arrested in Germany. The charge is clear, working on behalf of Russian intelligence, planning an assassination. Their target, a Ukrainian veteran. Location, Frankfurt. Germany's domestic intelligence acted at the last moment. The operation was thwarted, but the details that emerged shook Europe. The man organizing the assassination plot was an ethnic Armenian Russian agent, Vargas Fursta. According to German sources, the group's aim was not only to gather intelligence, but to ensure Ukraine isn't left alone, even on European soil. In other words, the Kremlin is no longer just fighting on the battlefield. It's waging war through shadows in the capitals of the West. And this time, Berlin didn't remain silent. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz appeared before the cameras. His words were clear: Such actions will not go unanswered. This statement wasn't just a stance from Germany, it was an indication of NATO's shifting posture as well. Because now the issue on the table is clear, a new burden falling on Europe's shoulders, and its name is 40,000 troops. NATO estimates that Russia could rebuild its military capacity by 2029. And to boost deterrence against this threat, it is asking Germany for 7 new brigades. This number is not just a goal. It's a clear message to Putin: we are ready. Berlin is reviewing this request seriously. Yes, the Bundeswehr has yet to reach its target of 203,000 personnel. Yes, there are staffing shortages and equipment challenges. But Europe is no longer just the defended. It must become the leader in defense. America continues to provide weapons, intelligence, and political support to Ukraine. But Washington's message is clear. We are not alone in this fight, but we must share the burden together. Germany has taken a historic budget step to share that burden. Defense spending is being raised to 5% of GDP. This is not just a defense budget, it's a security investment. So, do you think Europe is now closer to building its own deterrence? We're waiting for your comments, because the answers to these questions are being shaped not only in Berlin, but in Kiev, Brussels, and Washington. And now, in the midst of all these preparations, Ukraine is getting ready to deliver its final word. Because summer is coming. And this time, summer isn't just warm. It's a summer that could change the fate of the war. After months of defense, Ukraine is switching back to attack mode. The new systems have arrived at the front. US-made long-range artillery, Germany's laser-guided missiles, and the first wave of F-16s. All deployed not just to push the front line, but to break it. Kiev has defined its operational priorities. First, the Kupiansk and Lyman line in the east. Then, a corridor through Zaporizhzhia to the Sea of Azov. And ultimately, a pincer movement expanding toward Crimea. But this is not just a map plan. Ukrainian soldiers have transformed into a new generation army, trained with Western tactics, operating in coordinated air-ground maneuvers. And this time, they are not alone. American surveillance satellites are overhead at all times. NATO logistics routes are active. And European defense industry is no longer just a supporter, but a supplier. This picture shows us one thing. Ukraine is now receiving very serious support. But just at this moment, a countdown is ticking. The 2-week ceasefire window Trump gave to Putin is still seen by the Kremlin as a time-buying tool. The attacks continue, the peace table remains silent, and Washington is taking note. According to intelligence sources, the U.S. Department of Defense has prepared emergency plans to ramp up munitions supply to Ukraine. Stockpiles are being optimized, production lines are being accelerated. 122mm artillery shells, HIMARS munitions, and air defense batteries could soon be on the move again. But this isn't just a military shipment. It would be the implementation of a clear message to Putin. If you reject the ceasefire call, ammunition will rain on Ukraine. So, do you think the Kremlin can take that gamble? Or is time, this time, working in Ukraine's favor? Leave your comments below. Because this time, it's not bullets on the field, but decisions that will be decisive. And now, the big question. Is this support only strengthening Ukraine on the battlefield? Or is it beginning to crack the Kremlin from within as well? You'll find out shortly, because the next segment will shed light on the unseen fractures within the Putin regime. And those cracks are now visible, not just in backrooms, but in the streets, on screens, in public opinion polls. A large part of the Russian public is beginning to question where this war is heading. Polls are clear. 62% of the population says it's time for a ceasefire. And for the first time since the war began, 48% now say this war has brought nothing. Protests are growing, especially among the youth. Thousands who don't want to go to the front can no longer be silenced. Some are burning their draft papers, Others are trying to flee the country. But the most important point is this: no one wants to directly confront the US anymore. The economy is fragile, energy revenues are under pressure, access to technology is dwindling. And the average Russian on the street knows this all too well. Opening a front against America brings us nothing. And this is exactly the kind of turning point we're capturing. We don't hide the truth between the lines. We investigate it carefully and construct it with precision. We're here not to show what's already seen, but to reveal what some refuse to see. This isn't just a video, it's a collective focus, a joint effort. If you're watching, we're not holding back. If we're telling the story, it's for you. To present something better with every new piece, to reflect our effort in every word. Because this is not just a channel, it's a community. And that community is growing with respect. Everyone who comments, contributes, waits for the next update is now part of this story. Supporting our honesty is in your hands. Let's meet in the comments.